Okay, so in this tutorial is all about kind of rendering out different passes to put them in Photoshop and what kind of fun you can have kind of different presentation wise, splitting these things up, um, like using mask and the different, selection tools in Photoshop to kind of like bring out, and with this, we talked about the AOVs, rendering out in like multiple layers over here. That can be done too. But sometimes I just like to render out an occlusion map and like a wireframe map and like a diffusion and go ahead and slap it into Photoshop and kind of do maybe like split screen kind of presentation stuff, or just a opacity between those three major images. Looks pretty cool. You can have a lot of fun with it, and then you can kind of do more stuff in post. Here I just have one kind of split screen. I've slapped a background in there in Photoshop, so that's why you're seeing like these little edge lines here, but like you can kind of mask out a nice little gradient um, between the two, the wireframe occlusion and then just the regular diffuse and occlusion. So let's show you how to do this. And this is all second time I've had to do this video. That was the previous video. Um, I like to do this in the Arnold render view, and I do this through the render setup right here. And we talked about this making an occlusion map for the room, kind of the same way, like on the override, adding shaders and stuff to it. Now I already have my diffuse kind of. It's got a lot of noise there. I could crank up maybe my camera a little bit, make some of this noise go away here, but I'm not really worried about that right now. I'm just kind of showing you how to get these images rendered out. And I just save these in the basically the Arnold render view as a PNG and without a background or with background. I have a sky dome in there, and I could actually turn the background up if I want to. Doesn't affect the intensity, but sometimes I like to put my own background in Photoshop. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create, I have my diffuse, my beauty scene, my whole scene, so I'm not really worried about, I'm just going to make an occlusion layer over here, create a new layer, turn this thing off. Get rid of that for right now. Yeah, so I'm going to call this occlusion, double click on it, call this occlusion. And for the occlusion layer, you don't need lights or anything, like when you add to the layer. Actually, I'm going to create a diffuse layer real quick just to kind of demonstrate. So I am going to select the light, I'm going to select the ground plane, and I'm going to select my robot. I don't want this camera in there, don't really need it. There we go. I'm going to create collection. I want to add all three of those items. I'm going to rename this to diffuse. So that will be my diffuse override if I just want basically anything not related to the other part of the scene. I have a camera set in there too, just FYI. So whenever I render things out and my camera is basically locked, so I can't move back and forth. So over here everything's locked, so I can't, because it's pretty important whenever you're rendering out like different images. You want them all to be the same angle, same place, and you want them all to be the same size, which the same size can be adjusted in the comment tab of the render settings. I have it set pretty low here, so now I'm going to create an occlusion map layer, kind of like we did with the room demo, where you're just creating a occlusion map or occlusion map override. So call this one occlusion. And for this one, all I need is just the actual geometry. I don't need the sky dome or anything. The robot and or the plane and the robot. Collection, I'm gonna add those two items. So now here's whenever I go to right click and I create a shader override. Or let's do, yeah, I don't think it really matters. Shader or material, it's kind of, they're both overrides. So it's a shader, so let's call it a shader override. Go to my clacker here, go to my Arnold surface shader, ambient occlusion. So now if I go ahead and crank this running and I select the eyeball just for the occlusion map, it will render out the occlusion map for it. So I'm going to go ahead and save this image. I've been having problems with my renderer not saving, like it's not saving a correct PNG, so I'm hoping this works this time. I already saved a diffuse layer, so I'm going to call this the OCC.png. Check that. Cool. And I'm also going to save an occlusion map with the sky dome because I want that white background. I mean, I could add a white background, I guess, in Photoshop, but I'm just going to do it here. Background, it can be a PNG or JPEG, it doesn't really matter. So I'll turn this back down. Stop this. Now I'm going to create an override for a wireframe. I'm just going to add a new layer and call this a wireframe. I'll select the same things I had. I don't need my sky dome selected, but I want my ground plane to have a wireframe lay on it and robot itself. So create collection, add, create shader override, Placker, Arnold surface shader, AI wireframe. Now over here in your attributes, you've got different, I'll go ahead and run this to just demonstrate how it looks. Oops, I need to actually select wireframe so you can kind of see it in the actual render. Yeah, it's all triangly, that's not really appropriate, so obviously there's different settings over here, and you can actually turn the line color to a different color if you want to. Turn on to blue. Adjust the line width if you want to. I suggest keep it small, especially if you've got like a lot of little, because if you adjust your line width up, you won't see nothing but the actual color. And I usually keep mine white as a background, you know, unless you just want to save this as an image, because like when you screen it over in Photoshop, you don't get no other colors. This white will kind of negate out. So cool, and that's rendered, obviously. So I'm gonna save this one. .png. Cool. So I have a diffuse layer with no background, an occlusion map with no background, an occlusion map with a background, and the wireframe. So I have these four here that I have saved in this folder. So now I can kind of move out of Maya for a minute. And now I've opened up Photoshop here. Now there's different, you know, ways of doing this. This is kind of just how I do it. I do it a real simple way. Like with the AOVs, you just had to go to that EXR, then download a plugin. But with these being PNGs, you can kind of just open them up. So first I'm going to open up the diffuse. So, oh yeah, it's still grainy. I should have turned my camera up, but I didn't. But oh well. You could open up another and just kind of click it in there, but I just go to place embed, because if they're the same resolution, same size, they're gonna click right on where they go at. So open up the occlusion wireframe. That places it right in place. I'm gonna go to place embed, the wire. I'm sorry, the occlusion map, the wireframe. I'm gonna open up this one with the background in it, which is kind of pointless because I could have just added a white background, but you can always hide him. Put him at the back. Now, there's different things. Now, these things will come in like this. Part of this, you need to right click and rasterize them, because if you go deleting anything out of here, that asks you to rasterize them. So I just kind of go ahead and rasterize them. So now you can kind of delete this, and if you wanted to add a background, you can. You can place embed your own background that you wanted to. Oh, where did I have some cool little retro looking backgrounds? You know, and obviously there's a lot of color correction that needs to kind of go on, you know, to kind of like make it not so look so pixelated, where the background kind of blur. Sometimes you can go and you can blur the sides, you know, like that. But right now I'm gonna turn this off. So first off the bat, what I'm gonna look at is the way this occlusion map kind of looks. If I only have the occlusion map and the layer selected, the diffuse layer. If I convert my, I'm actually going to duplicate this occlusion map. Or do I need to? We'll put these on top. I'm going to turn this occlusion map to a multiply. Kind of gives it a little bit darker look. See if you were to take it off. I mean, that way the occlusion map is basically layered onto that. And you can actually do that with the wireframe too. If you have that on here, you can actually multiply that. That's a pretty cool look too, I think. But say if you wanted to kind of get fancy and kind of like, and you could always turn these things down, like opacity, make them look like they're kind of barely showing, so you can see the wireframe display in there. Now, if you want to do stuff like kind of mask over stuff, like I had it represented at the beginning. Let's see how we can do this. Notice I've got just like three layers I'm messing with. It was just a little easier sometimes to keep them organized with all the EXR files you may get with the AOVs. So one thing you could do is I'm going to take my wireframe and I'm going to put it down here. I'm going to hide these. May not end up using them in the background. I am going to open this one up, and this one's already multiplied, so that looks pretty good on that. I'm actually going to merge these two together. Actually I'm going to merge these two together. Turn this off. Or you really don't have to. That's kind of up to you. Let's just do it just to show you. Merge visible. So now this is one working layer, and underneath is the wire and the occlusion map. So what I'm going to do is go up to my, you could do this with the selection tool here if you wanted to, depending on how you want like your grid to kind of represent. It depends on the object too. I'm just going to use this polygon lasso tool and draw a shape. So I want this side right here, kind of had like in my demo video, to be to show the texture, then it's kind of like fading into maybe the wireframe occlusion. So I'm just going to draw like a straight line right here, connect it off the canvas. You notice up here it's got a feather. That means whenever you delete it, basically it's going to feather out a gradient. So it's not going to be like a hard edge. So you can kind of hope that for the best. I delete. Okay, that don't look too bad. Control Z, put select and mask. And what this does, it brings up kind of how what's been deleted and what's not. Now I've got like, I need to flip it over because it's basically showing this is deleted on the other side. You can actually adjust it like that with the contrast. Invert, yeah, there we go. That's what I was originally wanting. You can kind of adjust the edges like that. The transparency, if you notice, you still got that green material in there. So if you want to just crank it completely down like that, now you've got going from non-textured to just textured, fully textured and everything. I kind of like that. That's cool. Maybe I can shift my feather a little bit more. Doesn't look too bad. Kind of going around. I kind of wanted a straight split right there, but and just delete. Nope. Just deleting that. I need to invert it. I don't know why. Whenever I mask it, it inverted. But if that happens, you could just go to your select inverse, delete, and to deselect, Control D, takes it off. So now you kind of had, and if you notice your occlusion map, you've deleted half of it, which I would suggest duplicating it first and then hiding it so you have it original to come back to if you need to. I didn't do that here, but obviously I was just kind of moving fast with it. But yeah, that's kind of a cool way to kind of mask out stuff. And the reason you can't see the background now is because the occlusion map that I rendered out with the straight white is covering the background, which means that if you try to bring it in now I need to kind of go and delete half of this one. Let me do that real quick. See if we can get like a nice background fade in with it. Yeah, delete. Oh, I need to rasterize it. Click. But yeah, that's kind of working out now. It's kind of a little off there, but you can kind of move it maybe. Go to edit, scale it out a little bit so it fills the back, but kind of matches that line swipe. That'll work. And then if you, sometimes I kind of torn on these edges right here, you can kind of maybe go through and blur. Take a blur tool, turn it down some, and select this layer right here. Kind of blur it a little bit so it kind of fades, but you don't see those glares. It looks kind of like it's filling in a little bit. This may be screwing it up. I'm not really sure. That's pretty cool. Probably a little too strong, but it kind of blends it in a little bit more. Yeah, and then you can basically, if you don't like this right here, you can add an adjustment layer. Maybe it will adjust the entire thing though. Multiple options you can do with this. This will affect this right here. You can kind of link it just straight to this, or just add an adjustment layer to this. Here, select, filter. Oh yeah, it's just doesn't. I think you can directly affect the bottom one right there. Yeah. So if you need to adjust like levels and stuff in the top one and not affect all this down here, just Alt, just hover between them like I just did and press Alt. This little arrow comes out and now it's like affecting the entire thing, but now it's like this right here. So yeah, that's a cool way of like presentation wise. There's a lot of things we can go start doing with this. Like if you were to render out sequences of these things, now you've got like a full 360 turn of your wireframe, and you could start making them fade in and out of each other, like with an animation. And I'll go over that in the next little blurb of videos. But definitely Photoshop and dressing these things up in post and kind of representing two. I mean, sometimes it's if you don't have a lot of space to put like two giant images, maybe split it up and have your best part sticking out with a nice diffuse material, and the rest is kind of representing the wireframe occlusion style of the model. So I kind of dig it sometimes. But yeah, the sky's the limit with that. So okay, well, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.